Hey there, today I'm going to be dropping another figure review. This time around is a GBK Hiya Skullcrawler. You guys might remember this guy from the short moment that we saw him on screen as he got butchered by Mechagodzilla. In his memory, I'll be dedicating this figure review to him. So let's talk about the specs of this figure and see how it delivers. Let's go! Alright everyone, so I want to go ahead and kick off this review and say this about this action figure. I've been sitting on this figure for about a month, but I'm going to go ahead and do this review a little bit differently than the standard review rather than just talking about this individual figure. We're also going to go ahead and talk about the Skull Devil, which was released sometime a few months ago, I feel like it was. But we're going to go ahead and do a comparison on those two figures and just see what changes have been made and kind of give my opinion and add it to the poll. But first of all, we'll go ahead and talk about the box art and of course the individual figure before we get into a comparison. Now in my past reviews, I've talked about the fact that I don't generally like simplistic box art, but this one I make an exception for. I just love what we're getting right here. The Skullcrawler emerging from its gate being released, all this atmosphere in the background around him, the lighting, the color, it's just simple and great. Off to the side we have the logo, and then we have Skullcrawler in this scratchy font and all the other extra information that you would expect on the box art of a Hiya action figure. On one side we have a side profile shot of the Skullcrawler looking fantastic, and then another shot with this grotesque tongue just hanging out of the mouth of the Skullcrawler. And on top we're just reading Exquisite Basic Godzilla vs. Kong with more atmosphere. And then to finish it off we have a nice and uniformed back packaging with a few promotional shots of the Skullcrawler. And now, an actual product review of what's inside the box and why you're here. So, I firmly believe that the Skullcrawlers in general are probably one of the best army building creatures from the Monsterverse. You can have as many of these guys as you want to. In a similar fashion to the Stormtroopers, the Xenomorph from Alien, just knock yourself out and get as many of these as you want, as much as your space allows you in your collection. This one right here is very different than the previous release that we saw from Kong Skull Island. Now, I like to say this one is more on the cartoony side as far as like the paint apps. It's a lot more glossy in general. We have this dark sewer green, and then for that we have use of reds throughout and some yellows. The top of the head is where we see this shine the most. Just look at this beautiful transition from this red all the way to like this light green yellow going on. We watch the red continue on all the way down to the tail, right about here. But just when we think we're done, we watch a re-emergence on the side of the barbs of the tail of the Skullcrawler. More red littered on the elbows where we see the nice little spikes, and take a look at these nice wrists. These wrists and arms and everything with the body, by the way, is the exact same mold, I do want to go ahead and say as a disclaimer, as the previous release. However, it is not entirely the same as the Skull Devil that was released earlier on. Back to these wrists though, we have a nice transition of reds and greens right in between all that detail going on, and it just continues all the way down to the hand, these nice looking claws. And inspecting the underbelly of the Skullcrawler, we have this nice fleshy color, and it just continues on all the way up to the neck, and then we watch it end and go to like this lime color on the underneath of the jaw of the Skullcrawler. And here's your close-up look of that gruesome looking mouth. Now there are some big changes here I will talk about in a moment, but go ahead and just sink in the details of the roof of the mouth and the tongue, the teeth. It just looks astonishing. Now where the changes come about for this Skullcrawler is we watch some changes come about with the neck. We have more cuts, making this neck superior to the previous release, and I'll get into that more deeply when we talk about the articulation in a moment. But where the big change is for the sculpt though, is the mouth. Now, the other release made use of like this rubbery plastic, which I thought was fantastic because we watched the jaw open and it looked a lot more lifelike when we opened up the jaw. However, though, this one removes that though, and rather just goes with the standard plastic for like the gums. Now, the problems with the original release. I've heard complaints about it cracking, becoming brittle, and how will it hold up in the future the more you open up the mouth? I haven't had any issues with my Skull Devil, but time will tell. Maybe I'll report an issue to you guys later on. I'm still hanging fine. However though, this was the fix and hopefully it holds up for good. And who knows, maybe in the future for a Skull Devil, they'll retool the figure and they'll go ahead and give it this mold and this plastic for the mouth, because I don't think everybody was 100% satisfied with the last release and the way that was done. Like I said in my last review of that figure, I personally loved it. However though, it is great to see that Hiya looked at the problem and remedied it. So the articulation, I'm going to go ahead and switch things up. Rather than talking about the head first, we're going to go ahead and start with the tail and work our way all the way to the differences of this action figure. Tail is just a bendy wire, just like the last release. Once you get into position, it is pretty well stuck in that position. And then we make use of 1 and 2 more cuts, so you can get a little bit more wiggle room out of that tail. Now, you don't need to go ahead and put the tail together, by the way, so like a NECA figure, it's just together once you get the figure out of the box. Go ahead and move to the waist, and we do get some limited rocking room, and it's just nothing too much to brag about, but of course it's something you expect for an action figure like this. And for the arms, go ahead and spin it all the way around, and then spread it all the way out. Quite a bit of range that we have going on. Next we have a cut at the bicep, and then we have double jointed elbows, which were also on the previous release. Moving down to the wrists, this is where we can go ahead and see there are 2 different cuts between the wrist and the hands, and you can go ahead and spin this all the way around, and then for that, this is probably as far as you can get it up, all the way down, like that. So, it does a great job, but that's not even the best part, because that was all pre-existing on the previous release. Where it gets better is with the neck. And let's go ahead and bring the previous release in the frame so I can go ahead and talk about that. So right here, what I want to go ahead and do is show you a side-by-side comparison of the necks. As you can tell, it is obviously not the same. With new cuts means a brand new neck, so I think that it's kind of neat to see that we have some variation. One thing I do want to go ahead and discuss about this version of the Skullcrawler or Skull Devil is I do feel like the articulation on this one is substantially much more stiff than the Godzilla vs. Kong release. So there was a lot of stride to make that a lot better, and that is why, even though maybe I prefer the paint apps on this one, I gotta say that the other one does much better when you go ahead and talk about how fluid the articulation is, because this one just seems to be a lot easier to maneuver the joints around. And it's not that this one was very problematic. Right here in the elbows it was great, but other areas I can tell with like the body, this is where things get a little rough for this one. But this is definitely an upgrade, and I'm really feeling this, the changes, and who knows, maybe I just got a bad Skull Devil. And these figures really do go hand in hand when you go ahead and compare them and look at them. I feel like you can't have one without the other, and I gotta say that I'm really satisfied that Hiya, maybe like, I'd say even though 75% of the action figure is the same that we saw in the previous release, it makes it worth it for me because of the fact that they went ahead and retooled things. And there is a big variation in the paint apps of these 2 characters right here. Now, on top of that, it does get even better, but there are a few drawbacks that I will say that I wish that were there for this action figure. The good news is we have an alternate tongue that you can go ahead and just plug in the mouth. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how that works. So what you're going to go ahead and do is just going to go ahead and just pop this one out. It doesn't take much effort to get on now. Just go ahead and maybe turn it to the side, and it makes it much easier for you. And then for that, the second tongue, you can go ahead and just lay right in there. And that is that right there. I personally prefer this tongue. Oops, it didn't even get in there. Let's just go ahead and turn it to the side and try that, because I have put this in maybe once. Yeah, there we go. So, works kind of like that right there. I prefer this one. I'm going to go ahead and leave this one because of the variation. And it just looks extremely gnarly. But that's all we have for the accessories of this action figure. Outside that, there is one thing that I wish they had done for this. I would have loved to have seen them retool the hands. Like, let's just say they did ball joints where we could just pop these hands on out. And let's say there was a little just modifications to the digits. 2 different hands, maybe to where like his fists or feet or what you want to call it is just kind of closed. And you could put it in like a running position to make it look like it was kind of like sprinting. Now, you could kind of do that with this right here. However, though, this is not a lot really. I mean, this to me just looks like a standard flat standing position. So I would have liked to have seen 2 different hands with this right here. So maybe something to where it's like grappling, maybe kinda. That would have been great. Another thing is, I would have also not been objected to the idea of including a stand, one of those clear translucent stands, so that way we kind of get this tail up in the air like this right here. Now, I got plenty of stands I can just go ahead and pull off the shelves with action figures that I've gotten in the past, but it would have been great to see that included with this guy right here for a second release. Who knows? Maybe they'll go ahead and do that in the future. I highly doubt this is going to be the last Skullcrawler that we're going to see, but I do think new things can be done with the Skullcrawlers. or even the Skull Devil in future releases. And ultimately, this right here, I'm going to say it's not for everybody, but it is definitely an improvement. Now, any of you that want your very own Skullcrawler, go ahead and check the info section because I have a link down there for Calcus.com, which should have this still in stock. Overall, I do think this is a decent figure. I applaud Hiya for not doing a simple just repaint. It's a very vibrant figure, it has its changes. I do think that they still owe us a Mechagodzilla from Godzilla vs. Kong, so hopefully we can go ahead and get that, and that will complete the line for the most part. Once they get done with the focus on GXK, hopefully they can go ahead and bounce back to GBK and give us that. There's a lot of good things on the horizon from Hiya, so I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see what the next announcement's going to be. With that said, let me know. Are you going to get this figure? Are you going to pass on it? Or are you pondering the idea of getting it? You guys have a great day.